maintain a very business tone, maintain clarity, sincerity, honesty. Genuineness, substantiveness sells today and will sell forever. I established a vetting process and everybody has to go through the vetting process. If I receive 10 requests,
Meet Dave Chatterjee, a leading authority on cybersecurity and professor at Duke University. He created the CPD framework for cybersecurity strategies, also the author of Cybersecurity Readiness, a holistic and high-performance approach, and host of Cybersecurity Readiness Podcast. Recognized by Forbes, USA Today, and the RSA Conference Expert Portal, Dave shares his deep expertise and real-world insights through engaging cybersecurity workshops and webinars worldwide.
I do want to give my guest an opportunity to review what they said. If they want to edit something out, if something, people make references that we wish we didn't. I take a conservative approach to publishing a podcast.
I like that approach, which is soft. It's not even selling, it's facilitating business. It's very good. What's the number one challenge that you faced as a podcaster and how did you solve it?
One of the first things I was worried about was,
Dave, can you tell me the story of the Cybersecurity Readiness Podcast?
I've been doing cybersecurity work for the last decade or more. I published my first book in 2021. The book is titled Cybersecurity Readiness, a Holistic and High-Performance Approach. And so one of my undergraduate students approached me and said, Dr. Chatterjee, have you thought of doing a podcast to promote your book? We're talking about 2019. He had come to learn that I was writing the book and it'll get published. So I said, well, it's a thought, but I wasn't very social media savvy or friendly then. I said, I'll have to think about it. But he didn't give up on me or give up on the idea. He came back to me when the book was published and he writes to me in an email and says, I bought your book online. I read it. I've put together a plan. What do you think? I was impressed by his initiative, his eagerness. And I thought, well, just to please this young man, because he was embarking on a career as a podcast host, I said, you know what? Let's do it. So I agreed to do 8 podcasts episodes with his organization. And I clearly told him that that's it, because I can't imagine doing it forever, getting guests on the show. He says, no, Dr. Chatterjee, 8 and that's it. So we published the first episode in the month of June in 2021. We are in August. Yesterday, I published my 89th episode. It has been an absolutely amazing journey. It wasn't planned. It wasn't intended. It happened. I stumbled upon it. And I kind of found my way through it. Not trying to suggest I'm a great podcaster or anything, but I have kept to my strengths. I have kept to the vision I had for the podcast series, which was essentially trying to enhance awareness of the cybersecurity risks and how to mitigate them, how to deal with them. Another important driving factor was I wanted to reach out to the public at large, go beyond the security professionals, go beyond the business leaders. I wanted to go, reach the non-technical people who think cybersecurity has got nothing to do with them or their lives. If something happens, they'll reach out to a professional who will help them. I wanted to enhance their level of awareness. In other words, the goal was to try and socialize the cybersecurity talk with the masses, with the mainstream. And that's how the podcast emerged. I started reaching out to subject matter experts, to business leaders, got tremendous traction. And today, literally every day or every other day, I get a request to be on the podcast. It is a self-funded initiative. You can't pay to get on my podcast. I have a vetting process that I follow. And I make sure that it is meticulously done. I totally control literally everything, excepting for a few technical aspects, for which I have an amazing team who supports me, and I'm very grateful to them. But at the end of the day, the buck stops with me. I'm responsible for the quality of the content, and I spend a lot of hours making sure the content is as substantive as possible. So I'm going to pause.
No, I mean, I love this, Dave. So there are so many things that I want to follow up on here. First of all, I need to get in touch with that student because he knows how to get people to start a podcast. Second thing is, what kept you going? You arrive at the end of the 8 episodes, right? Which is you holding true to your words, right? So you said, "Hey, I'm gonna do it for an eight episode series," but then done. What kept you going after those 8 episodes? And then why going all the way and publishing 89 so far? And I'm sure far from being done.
Great question. So, when I started this initiative, I was driven by a mission to enhance awareness. I'm a professor by training and vocation, though I'm a business school professor, but I'm not thinking money. How will I make it profitable? That was never a thought. The thought was I want to do it right and I want to maintain the level of quality. But what happened in the process was kind of magical. Every podcast episode, after recording, after receiving the transcript, I would review the transcript, edit the transcript. So I would be reading each recording, which is about 45 minutes to an hour long. I would be reading the transcript at least 4 to 5 times. So, what happened in the process? I was getting infused with knowledge that was being shared by people across the spectrum. Now, I won't say that I became an expert in all those areas, but they contributed to my overall awareness of cybersecurity readiness. I focus on the governance aspect. It contributed to enhancing the framework that I have developed in my book. It's called the Commitment, Preparedness, and Discipline Framework, CPD framework. So it was a very enriching experience from the knowledge standpoint. Whenever I'm invited to deliver a talk, I say it with complete humility. I'm never short of examples. I'm never short of anecdotes thanks to my podcast series. Very happy to report the podcast episodes have been referenced in research articles. They have been used as listening materials in the classroom. And I recently signed on with a major publishing company who wants to receive 3 to 4 cases from me annually. And the podcast episodes serve as a great resource for developing these cases. So it has served me very well from the standpoint of research, from the standpoint of teaching, from the standpoint of giving talks, from the standpoint of providing examples of best and good practices when I consult with companies. And last but not the least, I have met some amazing people throughout the world. The last episode that I recorded, the gentleman is a PhD in electrical engineering, if I remember correctly, and now he owns a security company. He's an absolute master at what he does. And I got so much joy and satisfaction talking with him, learning from him. And all of these things have kind of happened. Nothing was planned. I never thought it'll evolve this way. I still don't know what is the end game. But I know this much that I continue to get great feedback. I was just at a doctor's office. I was coming home and he had learned about my podcast series and he says, Dave, I want to start a podcast series. Can you help me? So, it just keeps growing and spreading. So it's all good. It's been a labor of love. I don't feel at all that okay, I'm kind of working hard. Is this worth it or not? I don't even think about it. Many advertisers have approached me, and I said no. I don't want the podcast to have any advertisements inserted. I want to keep it clean, and as long as I can support it and fund it, I will, until and unless I get a really good sponsor, which hasn't happened yet, and I'm in no rush. So that's been my approach. Just keep doing what I know how to do and do it well and not deviate from that.
And so, what's your philosophy when it comes to publishing a new episode? Because, I mean, obviously there is a bit of a reason why I'm asking this. So I understand, and you've mentioned this at the beginning of the talk, like you will focus on quality first and foremost, whatever happens. Not at the expense of quantity, but like you want to put out qualitative pieces of content here. When people go on with podcasts for an excellent period of time, they tend to have a publishing schedule, right? Okay, in order to publish 90 episodes, I know I need to be consistent. Therefore, I'm going to publish an episode every month, like the first Monday of the month, or an episode every other week on Tuesday at 8 a.m., or an episode every week on Wednesday evening, whatever it ends up being. I have the feeling that for you, it's not like properly scheduled in the sense of like, it's not, okay, at this day in time, I always publish an episode. So what's your philosophy when it comes to coming up with content
Yeah.
and the publishing schedule?
So when I started doing this, I stuck to a very rigorous schedule. I would publish an episode every second Wednesday of the month. And I maintained that schedule for the longest period of time. But then things happened. I lost my father. I went to India for the final rites. So that affected my publishing schedule, but I still was maintaining 2 a month. Then in June, early June, I had a double bypass open heart surgery. So that got me off track. But I'm right back on, maybe not 2 in the last couple of months, but 1 a month. So I try to make sure that I at least put 1 episode out there. And now that I'm in the 89th, 90th episode, I would like to believe that I have a very captive and loyal audience who will not be that concerned if the frequency, if the number of episodes per month is a little off target, or if I'm a little delayed, though the intent is still to publish at least 2 episodes a month. Yes, Wednesday mornings was what my undergraduate student, who he and I had discussed and he had recommended. But there is a part of me that likes to experiment. I believe that you get guidance from the best and you start on that pathway, then you evolve, then you get creative, and then you experiment. So what if I published, like yesterday, Monday evening, I published an episode because I knew there had been a little bit of a gap. The episode came together. I got an approval from the guest, and I said, you know what, I'm going to release it this evening. I felt good about it. So I'm also a very instinctive kind of guy. I go with my gut. If my gut says, Dave, release, I release. So that's kind of the way I operate. Not always trying to stick to the routine, but making sure I'm giving my audience a regular feed of insightful knowledge, let's say.
Okay, so I love this. What's the business behind it, Dave? Obviously, you have a business, right? You help companies with cybersecurity. Can you tell us a bit more about what you do? And then I'd like us to jump into how the podcast benefit the business and vice versa.
I'm a professor. That's my primary occupation. I was a tenured professor at the University of Georgia for 23 years before I transitioned out. I now hold an appointment with Duke University as an adjunct associate professor in the Pratt School of Engineering, where I'm often called upon to teach cybersecurity classes. So that's one part of me, the professor, the educator. And as I mentioned to you earlier, the podcast feeds into that in the form of class material, in the form of inviting guests to speak to my students, in the form of me having greater knowledge and insights as to what's going on currently, because I'm constantly talking to people who are at the cutting edge, at the leading edge of things. So that's the teacher in me. I'm an author. I've published a book. The second book is under advanced review, should be published soon. So that content, once again, one of the sources, not the only source, one of the sources is the podcast. I also, as I told you, I also write cases, and the podcast serves as an important resource for the cases. I have a consulting company. It's called the Cybersecurity Readiness Consulting Services. But many of my engagements are not necessarily done under that umbrella. It all depends on what the engagement is. If a C-level executive calls me and says, Dave, we have run into this issue, what would you advise? Or how can you help us, guide us? Or I might be invited to a C-level session to brainstorm, to provide them with an outside the box, relatively objective perspective on how they should be shoring up their cyber defense. And every time I'm called upon to share my insights, share what's happening in other industries, the podcast serves as an important resource, not the only resource, but as an important resource. Because just think about it. I literally talk to the founder of a company or a major leader of a security company, subject matter expert, every week, literally, or every other week. So I'm constantly getting on what's happening, what's the latest. So I am in a very fortunate position to be able to draw from that and offer good guidance to whoever has sought my guidance. So that's how the podcast has helped my consulting, teaching, speaking activities.
Your podcast is a tool to build authority, thought leadership, PR, basically. And hey, you just got approached by a big publication media, right, who asked you to do cases with them thanks to the podcast as well. So you have this all authority building. When people find out about you, they go and check your podcast and they're like, yeah, Dave knows his stuff. You mentioned that it was used as materials in courses as well. Do you refer to your podcast to your students? For instance, like, hey, guys, obviously there is so much that we can cover this year on this topic, but if you want to find out more or dig deeper and potentially get an A+, I don't know, go and listen to that podcast. Is that something that you use as well as educational content for your students?
Great question. I shall share with you exactly what I did at the class I taught 1.5, 2 years ago. So I was meeting with students, say, I had 7 or 8 sessions, but each session was almost 3 hours long. So I would break up the sessions into segments, where there would be a segment where I would be doing an interactive discussion with them on the material. Then they'd take a break, they'd come back, and then I'll invite one of my guest speakers, who was a podcast guest, to come and talk about the topic we discussed in the episode. And for that session, students had to be prepared by having listened to that podcast. So now they have this guest who had appeared on my podcast. Now they have this leader in front of them via Zoom mostly, and they can ask questions. And I had built in at least 6 or 7 such sessions in that entire course, where I had subject matter experts from different parts of the world Zoom in to my classroom to share with students their perspectives, their thoughts on cybersecurity. It was quite the experience, and I can't imagine how I could have ever done that if I didn't have this podcast. Because as you correctly said, it's been a terrific vehicle to allow me to connect with people around the world. And it's so important to get the European perspective, to get the Asian perspective, to get the South American perspective, to get the African perspective. Because the cybersecurity challenges can vary. It can be nuanced depending on the environment. So to capture the phenomenon in a most holistic and rich manner, the podcast has definitely paved the way. By the way, it happens to be in 117 countries now. So there are people who are downloading and listening, and the feedback that I keep getting, I never ask for a regular feedback, but sometimes they'll write and say, please don't stop. This is wonderful. I heard from a senior leader of a major financial institution who said, I wanted you to know, I listened to your podcast to update my level of awareness because my day-to-day job doesn't allow me that luxury. So to him, this is an important knowledge source, knowledge portal that he plugs into to learn as much as he can. So I get these very positive feedback that makes my day, and rejuvenates me, and I keep on, because I feel there is a silent listener base out there who look forward to what I have to offer, or what my guests have to offer.
So that's for the students part of things.
Yeah.
Do you get business out of this, Dave?
So when you talk about business in terms of money, direct money, I would say at this point in time, no.
Yeah, so I wouldn't necessarily, the way I would define business is, so obviously, right, because that's what we do. So
Yeah.
the way to get clients thanks to a podcast is mainly through building an audience
Yeah.
of ideal
Yeah.
potential clients, right? So you publish content that matters to them, pain points, desired outcomes. And I feel in your niche, and that's something that's very interesting about cybersecurity, is that it's not a pain point until something bad happens, and then it becomes an absolute priority. That's so. I mean, it's easier to sell painkillers than vitamins, right? Exactly the same with cybersecurity. So for you, like, I can't imagine somebody who's not in the field listening to a podcast about cybersecurity, right? Unless they've went through something very bad and they are now like, we need to do something about this. So how do you see that potentially thin line between your audience and the ideal clients who might be listening to you, and making the link with, hey, I might want to reach out to Dave to see what he has to offer in cybersecurity?
Like I shared with you, I get these consulting engagements. I get invites to speak at conferences. Many of these invitations, they pay for my airfare, they pay for my hotel. You know, they will often pay honorarium for delivering a talk, whether it's conferences, whether it's institutions. The podcast helps because, like you said, it provides me with greater credibility. I will say this. I hope I don't sound in any way that I'm trying to toot my horns here, but I have been a fairly well-established, reputed academic researcher. I've published in the top journals, both academic and professional. So I already had an established foundation before I got into cybersecurity. And so I already had a very established network where I had, I would say, reasonable name recognition. Now this has enhanced it. And it has also exposed me to an entirely new audience. And so I'm now crafting new relationships, new partnerships, and I believe I'm just getting started in terms of what you call business endeavor, where I can't talk about some of them yet because they're under formative stages. But I'm very pleased with the way things have evolved. You know, Philosophically, I'm a believer in fate and destiny, and I'm a believer in patience. And I'm also a believer in you have to allow things to happen and don't not be in a rush. Fortunately, there is nobody telling me that you have to meet a certain sales target by a certain day, a certain time frame. I am my boss. I decide how I pace this, where it goes, what I expect from it, and let things happen. And I must tell you that there have been periods of a little bit of frustration that maybe things weren't happening exactly how I planned. But then when they happened and they happened differently, I was like, wow, I actually like that even better. That was better than what I had thought about. So that's the kind of person I am. I'm not looking to see, okay, in 5 years' time, how much money will I make, or 10 years' time. No, I'm always thinking, how can my product add value to people, to organizations? That's my focus. The money part is a byproduct. I am not driven by any monetary goals. I am driven by making sure the product quality is top notch, it is relevant, and then I believe everything will fall in place. So I never lose sleep over, oh, by now I should have bagged such and such sponsor, blah, blah, blah.
No, of course.
And one more thing I've stopped doing, I've stopped comparing. You will appreciate this. I get an email from this particular group. They say, by the way, we have ranked your podcast as the top 10 in the state of Georgia, the top 100 in the country. Will you be willing to promote us with these rankings? I don't respond because to me those rankings mean nothing. I know how these rankings are often developed, created. They're not very objective. So once again, I'm happy to have silent listeners who probably get a lot of value. Sometimes they will share, sometimes they won't share. Like I tell you, this collaboration with this publishing house, this is a phenomenal accomplishment because I will now have the opportunity to inform students across the world through the cases, hopefully for a long period of time. Think about the impact that these cases will have in helping produce superior cybersecurity professionals. So the impact is cannot just be measured in dollars and cents. It has to be measured in terms of reach, in terms of just the capacity of knowledge that it creates. So it's still, I would say, I see these results to be a little more intangible, a little more intrinsic, and not something that I can just quantify. Yes, there are quantifiable metrics. I shared with you number of episodes, in which countries it has been downloaded, over 13,000 downloads and so on and so forth. But I don't fall for that. My thing is, when I publish something, I know it is the best quality that I could produce. And that's my goal. And then I leave it for the consumers to make the call that if it is worth for them to consume. So I keep it very simple. I keep it low pressure because there is so much joy and thrill in preparing for these podcasts. That's the other thing. Every time I'm having to interview or engage in a discussion with a subject matter expert, and sometimes we talk about things that are not directly in my zone of expertise, I have to read up, I have to prepare. So I'm learning. So it's offering me an opportunity to continuously learn and update myself, which in itself is a major reward.
And that commands respect. Dave, what's the number one challenge that you faced as a podcaster, and how did you solve it?
One of the first things I was worried about was, how do I keep up getting the right kind of people? I just can't accept any and everybody. How do I get the right kind of people and get at least, to be able to produce at least 2 episodes every month? To start with, I was a little worried. But surprisingly enough, I had a captive pool of my connections. They served as my guest. But over a period of time, I established a vetting process, and everybody has to go through the vetting process. And so let's say if I receive 10 requests, after the vetting process, 5 or 6 get approved, and they come on my show. So the flow has never been a challenge, though I thought it would be a challenge. The second issue has to do with the workload, the workflow, managing different pieces of the podcast. In my case, it starts with receiving a proposal, reviewing the proposal, seeing if there is a fit, responding to that email, then having an intro call first to get a sense of the person who I'll be talking with, whether we have a chemistry, whether the person is able to share what they want to share in a manner and a fashion which will be relatable to my audience. And then we go to recording. After recording, transcription, editing, publishing in the different networks, marketing. There are lots of pieces, as you know. I'm not trying to preach to the choir here, but there are lots of pieces to the puzzle. And many a times I have been approached by companies saying, Dave, you just do the interviewing and we do everything else. It requires a lot of money, investments, which I was not willing to pay. And second, I was uncomfortable giving up control until I had enough trust. Like someone said, Dave, you do the podcast, and as soon as you're done, you'll hit this button and it'll go live. While I appreciate that approach, there is strengths to that approach, but I was not comfortable with that. Because the nature of the podcast I do, where we are discussing such important content, that I do want to give my guest an opportunity to review what they said. If they want to edit something out, if something, people, when we talk, sometimes we make references that we wish we didn't. So I take a conservative approach to publishing a podcast. And I'm not in a rush to because mine is not a banter. Mine is not, You won't sign up for my podcast if you are wanting 30 minutes of laughter. I'm sorry, that's not mine. If you're wanting to learn, we try to be humorous, we try to be as relaxed as possible, but we do have some serious content. We're talking about good practices, we're talking about how do you solve problems, and these are real issues that's plaguing the organizations. And these people who come on the show, they are active practitioners. They're either solving the problems directly in a leadership capacity, or they're building solutions to try and solve the problem. So, yes, many of them come to promote their business. So, they see this podcast as a medium to promote their business. But guess what? Nobody openly promotes it, because I have a very clear directive that this has to be an educational discussion. Sure, you can talk about your company, but it has to be very brief. But at the same time, you have to offer guidance to the listeners that if they're looking for a particular type of solution, what factors should influence their vetting process, where they not only vet your company, but they also vet other companies. So I try to be as objective, as fair as possible. Some might think, oh, he gets a lot of solutions providers. And my response to that is, there is nothing wrong with solutions providers. Because the way I see it, whether it's the solutions providers, whether it's the chief information security officers, we have lots of practitioners in the world of security doing great work. And mostly their work goes unheard of, goes unrecognized. As you said, our human nature is when disaster strikes, we sit up and we start doing things. We start pinpointing who is responsible, whose jobs we can fire, so the organization looks good in front of, say, the Wall Street numbers, and so on and so forth. So my goal has been, how about also recognizing these people who are doing great work when no incident has happened? Why not show them as the heroes that they are? Because of the work they are doing, we have been able to avert numerous incidents. So I see that my podcast provides that platform to the leaders to come and talk about what they do to protect their organization, and also to those who are developing solutions as to how their solutions can help. I never promote any particular product, but I facilitate the opportunity for potential buyers and potential sellers to learn about their products, their needs. So, in a way, create a marketplace without being really into it. That's not the goal either. The goal is to raise awareness, enhance knowledge, and then let the chips fall where they fall. So that's been a major revelation. I'll tell you another challenge. When I started doing podcast, I used to be very tense. It wasn't as organic or as impromptu as it should be, because I was being very careful what I said, how I said, and it was a little monotonous. My kids would often give me this feedback, Dad, you got to relax, chill out. I said, everything takes time. So, yeah, after 25, 30 episodes, hopefully I'm doing a little better now. So, even I have evolved as a podcaster. I have my little mannerisms. I probably repeat certain words that I shouldn't. But, it's the most important thing about human endeavor in whatever you do is try to get a little better every day. So this is one avenue which not only allows me to enhance awareness, but also improve my own skill sets, improve my own communication abilities. I'm very fortunate that you and your organization would consider interviewing me. This also, I feel, is a result of the work that I've been doing without any expectation. Did I reach out to you to say, hey, I want to come on your podcast? I didn't, right? You all reached out to me. And I said, okay, let's talk about it. Let's see. So I've taken that kind of an approach. It's, yes, I have goals, but I want to do it the right way. And then whatever happens, happens. And I'm happy with it.
Words to live by. And I like the philosophy of being about facilitating knowledge and business, basically in what you do with the podcast, right? You give access to those amazing guests and to your knowledge to the broader market. You eventually facilitate business by giving those guests a spotlight, right? Like, hey, okay, this is what you do. Obviously, you know your craft because you've been on the show and we heard you for 40 minutes. And I like that. I like that approach, which is soft. It's not even selling. It's facilitating business. It's very good. Dave, there is a question I ask all my guests at the end of those interviews. I'm inspired from by Jeff Bezos. When Jeff Bezos was building Amazon, right, he had a saying or something that he was going by, which is he wasn't trying to understand what's going to change in 10 years of like what's going to be the new technology, the new innovation. He asked himself and his team what is true today and is still going to be true in 10 years. Well, people are still going to want fast, great customer service, and plenty of products, cheap products ideally. And well, Amazon is the success that it is now. So the question I like to ask my guests is, for all the podcasters listening to us right now and wannabe podcasters, especially in B2B, in your experience, what is true today that is still going to be true in 10 years that we should double down on as podcasters?
Absolutely. Fantastic question. And my answer is as follows. Especially in a world where we have fake news, fake videos, fake audios, people are constantly struggling to figure out whether they should believe what they are hearing. So it is incumbent on us who are out there sharing our points of view, our opinions, that we be very responsible in what we say. We fact check ourselves as best as we can. We be honest, candid, without being rude or what should I say? Sometimes without trying to be provocative. And there's a disconnect. Many people will say, no, you have to be provocative to get people's attention. And I draw a line there. You can be provocative in a good way. When you make a compelling argument, when you are able to dispel a certain myth, but in a polite way, not trying to suggest that I know it all, so if I say it, that's all BS or something. I don't subscribe to that philosophy. My philosophy is maintain a very business tone, maintain clarity, sincerity, honesty. Because at the end of the day, just like you shared what Jeff Bezos believed in, genuineness, substantiveness sells today and will sell forever. There is no shortcut. Like, I don't like to use the word promotion or marketing because I believe the best form of promotion or marketing is when you have developed a good product and you maintain the good product and you share it in an honest manner. You don't try to oversell because you can fool. There's a saying, right? You can fool some people sometime, you can't fool everyone all the time. So therefore, it's very important to take this role that we have seriously and act as responsible citizens and put stuff out there that is positive, that is reinforcing, and that can help people, can help organizations. We don't need any more negativity than that's already out there. We don't need any more fake stuff that's already out there. I am not trying to wing it here. I'm not trying to slip a fast one here. I'm trying to be as genuine, as honest, as candid as I can. So that's been the effort. That's been the focus. And then, whether I'm perceived as a guru or as a nobody, even that I accept with folded hands because I once again have stuck to my philosophy, my approach. I have not deviated from it because I believe that is time tested.
Dr. Dave, ladies and gentlemen, Dave, if people want to find out more about you, what you do, or the podcast, where should they go?
If they do a search by Cybersecurity Readiness Podcast series, they should be able to get to the portal. They can search by my name, Dave Chatterjee. they'll get to my portal. From there, they can also approach, learn about the podcast and the other things I do. And if it is possible, I can send you some links that you can share when you release the podcast, so they can click on the links and they can go to the appropriate sites. In fact, I'd like to mention I have a resources page where I offer a lot of intellectual material that's free of cost that they can download. For instance, all the podcasts that I do, detailed podcast summaries with highlights, with memorable quotes and comments. They are in those documents, and I make it available to the public to download, to learn from. Researchers across the world find that resource to be very valuable. They reach out to me all the time, wanting me to point them to those sites. So I'll be happy to share that link as well, if it helps anybody out there.
We will put all the links in the description. Dave, thank you so much for coming on Podcast Gurus.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been truly a pleasure.